What's going on, everybody? This is Emerald Knight Leon back with another deck analysis. Originally, I wanted to cover Alphamon, but I thought to myself, one of the things I've wanted to do is try to make some videos on like exactly how to play the game for beginners, because I want more people to really get into this game because I really enjoy it, and it makes me happy seeing people actually giving the game a chance and enjoying it. So I kind of thought to myself, well, I wanted to come up with a deck that really could help people learn how to play this format. And it came to my conclusion that GrandisKuwaga is that deck. Mainly because this is a deck that, if you don't have the money to get those promo Okuamons, which, it's running currently at about $17 right now, getting everything else you need for Grandis is actually really easy, and it makes Grandis probably one of the most budget-friendly decks in this set, in my opinion. So to start things off, we're going to run over our Digi-Eggs. We're running 4 copies of Yokomon from BT-05. Yokomon was a big staple when you were running Rafflesiamon back in the day, due to its inherited Digiburst effect. When this card is trashed due to activating this Digimon's Digiburst, one of your Digimon gets plus 2,000. You're going to mainly use that in conjunction with your Grandis here, just bumping his DP up so he's swinging over practically most things in your opponent's security for that OTK. We'll also be running, moving on to our level 3s, 4 copies of Kokuamon, 4 copies of Kokua X, 3 copies of Tentomon, and 4 copies of Promo Palmon. So, Kokuamon here is a card that I feel, if you want to run the X antibody for Kokua, you have to run this card, just to get that multi-stack. Otherwise, you'd have to wait a couple sets for the next Kokuamon that comes out, which is a 0 cost. But also, because this is more of a budget-friendly deck, getting that extra security attack, if you don't have the perfect stack going for you at that time, is still viable. So going on to our X antibody Kokuamon. He has a on play as well as when digivolving, like most of the level 3 X antibodies in this set. Reveal top 3 cards of your deck, add 1 card with Insectoid or Machine in its traits, and 1 X antibody among them to your hand. Place the rest at the bottom of your deck in any order. This is a nice effect, especially if you have to hard play Kokua X early on in the game. You can still get that searching function. We'll also be running 3 copies of EX1 Tentomon. The reason we're doing this is because of its inherited of when attacking, the next time one of your Digimon digivolves into a Digimon card with Insectoid or Ancient Insect in its traits this turn, reduce the cost by 1. So we're going to use that in conjunction with our X antibody card here, which will let us digivolve into a Digimon with X antibody in its traits for its Digivolution cost while we are swinging. So if you, for example, don't have your Palmon under here, you'll still be able to reduce the cost of going from GrandisKuwaga into Grandis, or if you don't have the GrandisKuwagas set up, you can go from Okua into Grandis, and because of Okua's effect, we're reducing the cost by 2. So Grandis will become a 2 cost to digivolve into. So that's going to be very useful if you are not able to get that perfect setup during the game, but you still need to get your swings in. Finally, we are running the 4 copies of the Promo Palmon. This is a pricey card as well. If you're not able to run this card, there are some other cards that have Digiburst inheriteds that you could run. You're just not going to be able to get the most bang for your buck. What Palmon does here is it's going to give your Digimon jamming. So we're going to get the plus 2,000 from Yokomon and the jamming from Palmon here onto Grandis. Grandis is just going to be swinging, and he's going to have that jamming. Literally, the only thing that will stop Grandis at that point is essentially just option cards from the security. That's really it. Moving on to our level 4s, we are running 3 copies of Weedmon, 4 copies of Kuwaga X, and 4 copies of Kuwagamon. So the Weedmon here is, again, another Digiburst card. It was a staple back in Rafflesiamon. It has the inherited of when it's trashed due to Digiburst, you gain a memory. So you're going to go into you're just setting up your memory with this. If you're in your GrandisKuwaga here. You're going to set up your memory so that you can reduce the cost of going into Grandis to make it like a zero cost, essentially, when you're Digibursting. And just in case, especially in the matchup, say, against the Metal Garurumon matchup, or the matchup against, say, Armor Rush. Both of those decks, they are running Ice Wall, and they are running Hammer Spark, and those coming out of security will net your opponent to memory. So getting that extra memory can save you from having it pass turn, and you're not able to attack anymore. Moving on, we were running 4 copies of Kuwagamon from EX1. He has the inherited of when this Digimon deletes one of your opponent's Digimon in battle and survives. One of your opponent's suspended Digimon does not unsuspend during the next unsuspend phase. It can be useful if you're not able to get into your GrandisKuwaga to do the Digibursting. Your Kuwaga can come in clutch by preventing your opponent from unsuspending during the next unsuspend phase if you're not able to OTK that turn. And we'll also be running 4 copies of Kuwagamon X Antibody. So this is a card that you could be running the promo Okuamon because it has a similar inherited. In that it basically gains piercing. So with Kuwaga X, it is, while this Digimon has Insectoid in its trait, it gains piercing. So we'll be able to suspend our opponent's Digimon, swing in with Grandis, have that piercing, potentially have the jamming from Palmon if we're going to run maybe 2 checks, if we're wanting to 3 checks maybe, depending on which cards were Digibursting from us. But that's about it. On our level 5s, we are running 3 copies of Okuamon and 3 copies of Okua X. There is some room to take some things out. Definitely, I know Tropical Venom is a card that I want to potentially make work, but it might not work very well for me in the long term, so I might take this out, bump the Okuas to 4 each, maybe, to guarantee more odds of seeing them in my hand and through my draws. But Okuamon, this is a BT-09 Okuamon. It has the inherited when this Digimon deletes an opponent's Digimon in battle and survives, gain 1 memory. Again, we're just gaining that memory from Grandis or from our Gran. And with the piercing, we're going to just swing multiple checks, then unsuspend, and then swing again. And because this isn't a once per turn, if we haven't Digibursted this card yet, then we're getting multiple 1 memories from there. Speaking of Okua, we have Okua X Antibody. It has a when Digivolving, if Okuamon or X Antibody is in this Digimon's Digivolution cards, suspend one of your opponent's Digimon, and then this Digimon, if this Digimon is attacking, you may switch the target of the attack to one of your opponent's suspended Digimon. So this is kind of playing off of you're having the piercing already in play if you want to do some early swings to keep your opponent from building a big board. You'd be able to just swing in with Okua at their more smaller fry so they don't have as many bodies to swing against you next turn. It does have the risk, though, of your main stack getting bodied if you're bringing it out, but if you're playing some extra cards, like if you're running Weedmon and you're just hard playing that early on to get, that choking if your opponent doesn't have a memory tamer and you have one at the time, that is a viable way of getting Okua's effect off. Moving into our level 6s, we are running 3 copies of GrandisKuwagamon and 3 copies of Grandis. So the GrandisKuwagamon we are using, the one you want to be using, and it is a little pricey still, running about $8, but you're only getting 3 copies of it at most. And this is the promo GrandisKuwagamon. This one has a Digiburst 2 effect, where one of your Digimon gains security attack +1 for the turn. So you're going to use this about 2 times maybe to have a total of 3 checks. If you have the Palmon, that's going to give you jamming. If you have the Yokomon, that's going to give you +2,000. and this is going to transfer over to your Grandis. So at that point, you're going to just put your X antibody under, swing, Digivolve into Grandis here. Grandis is now going to have 4,000 plus his automatic extra 4,000 being 8,000. He's going to have jamming. If you're Digibursting Weedmon, you're going to get that extra memory. There's a lot going on here. And going into Grandis, when Digivolving, suspend one of your opponent's Digimon. And then if this Digimon is attacking, you may switch the target of attack to one of your opponent's suspended Digimon. And then end of attack once per turn. If GrandisKuwagamon or X Antibody is in this Digimon's Digivolution cards, suspend one of your opponent's Digimon and unsuspend this Digimon. So, what does this mean? This basically means you're swinging at 18,000. If you still have, say, your total stack is going to, your perfect stack is going to be 1 level 2, 2 level 3s, or 1 level 3 if you're using Palmon. So, potentially 2 level 4s, 2 level 5s, a GrandisKuwaga, and Grandis. That is, let's say, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 cards under, 8 with the X antibody. That gives you essentially 1, 2, potentially, 2 putting under. If you are running the Kuwagas, you can Digiburst the Yoko, the Palmon, the OG Kuwaga, and the Okua X for 3 checks, and then you'll be able to unsuspend because you still have GrandisKuwaga and X antibody under. Because we need to keep the X antibody. We can't trash X antibody because of its effect. We're going to unsuspend. We're going to swing into another one of our opponent's suspended Digimon. We're going to still have that piercing if we still have Kuwaga X under. We're going to swing another 3 checks. And ideally, if we have an extra body on board to go for game. And the reason we have the extra body is because we're running Mimi here. But we'll move into that later. Moving into our option cards. We're running 1 Hidden Potential Discovered, just in case you can't get that perfect stack to reduce Grandis's cost. Hidden Potential Discovered, if you have more than 2 bodies, you can use Hidden Potential Discovered's effect to suspend one of your bodies to ensure that you have the final, swing. It reduces the cost of Digivolution by 5 by suspending one of your Digimon. We're also running 2 copies of Tropical Venom. The reason I want to use Tropical Venom is in those matchups against Armor Rush and against Metal Garurumon. Because they're going to be running Ice Walls and Hammer Sparks. And so what Tropical Venom does is it's 0 cost option card. And one of your opponent's Digimon gains on deletion lose 2 memory until the end of their next turn. So you're going to use this in conjunction with Grandis to suspend, gain that piercing. You're going to gain memory. So in case the piercing goes into security and you end up hitting a Ice Wall or an X antibody or a Hammer Spark, you're still going to be safe because it's still going to be your turn. The only caveat with Tropical Venom is it does not have a security effect, so it cannot be added from your hand to your hand if it's been hit through security, which is the main issue. But in a budget deck like this is a good card to use ideally. We'll also be running 2 green memory boosts. The reason we're using green memory boost here is because we're not running Cool Boy. You could run Cool Boy if you wanted. Again, Cool Boy, though, is still running a bit over $4 right now. So if you wanted to run 3 or 4, that's a good, $12, $16 sometimes, depending on shipping. If you're able to get them through packs, that's great. Otherwise, Green Memory Boost is a card that you can use ideally. We'll also be running 2 X antibodies. We really only need to run 2. If it comes from security, it's going to go to our hand and we're gaining a memory. We can place this card under one of your Digimon without X antibody. So when it says X antibody, it's not referring to the trait X antibody. it is referring to the option card X Antibody. So you cannot stack 2 X Antibody option cards under one of your Digimon. I was in a tournament a couple recently, and this came up because my opponent was running D Reaper, and he was fairly new to this D Reaper, and he asked me, "Are you able to put that under?" And I'm like, "Yes, I'm able to put it under my Digimon because of the fact that it doesn't have X Antibody, the option card, under there." On to finally our Tamers. We're running 2 copies of Mimi. She is going to be our memory fixer, and she's also going to be our lethal, potentially. So if we don't have the multiple bodies on board to, like, for Grandis to take out all of your opponent's security and then have an extra body to swing for game, Mimi is going to be our answer, because we'll have a level 3 or 4 in our raising at that time. Hopefully, potentially, maybe, who knows. Ideally, you could run 2 Mimis. The reason we're running 2 Mimis is hopefully we can get those 2 out so we can chain both of them. Essentially, we're going to go into our breeding. We're going to Digivolve through the first Mimi, and then we're going to bring it out from the second Mimi. And that can be our lethal. We'll also be running 3 copies of Izzy Izumi from the starter deck 4. Reason we're running this instead of Cool Boy: I don't have enough Cool Boys to constantly be swapping over from decks. I'm already swapping Cool Boys between 3 decks already. I don't want to add a 4th deck to this. Izzy is actually a good card for this deck, though, because of the fact that it's fairly easy to get, it's relatively cheap, and it is in both its play cost and its actual pricing. But also its effect. When one of your opponent's Digimon becomes suspended, you can suspend this tamer to gain a memory. So you're going to chain this off of a lot of your different effects to just suspend your opponent's Digimon, gain the more memory to continue your evolution chain. Now that is it for this main deck. On to different option cards. Now I just want to clarify, though, a lot of the new promo cards that have come out, such as Ultras Mode, Sagittarius, and the new Okuwamon, they have not been added to Digimon Card Dev. So I will be going over the Okuwa, though. But to start off, our different types of option text that we could put in. If you don't want to run Yoko, you could run Argomon for its ability inherited when this Digimon becomes unsuspended, gain 1 memory, and Gummymon, which when an opponent's Digimon becomes suspended, draw 1. Problem with Gummymon that I've seen is that it can be a little easier to deck out through Gummy, and it can be kind of a hazard at times. The Yokomon, on the other hand, can give you that extra 2,000. As for different level 3s, we have Terriermon as a memory blocker. Your opponent won't be able to gain memory except from tamer effects. If you can't run the Palmon, Lalamon is also similar in that it has a inherited of when it is Digibursted, you can return it to your hand, essentially setting up for lethal if needed. We also have Pomumon from the BT-09 set. It basically will prevent your opponent from playing Digimon by card effects. And Tentomon from the starter deck as a means of searching your deck for a green Digimon. It essentially makes it so that you reveal the top card of your deck. If it's a green Digimon, add it to your hand. Otherwise, place it at the bottom. It's iffy. It might not be reliable, but it is a possible option for you. As for level 4s, Kabuterimon from the starter deck as a blocker. Sneemon from starter deck 9 due to its security effect that lets you play it for free. And then it's on play suspending an opponent's Digimon. So if your opponent's memory is at 1, and you have 2 Izzies out, and this gets played, you can suspend opponent's Digimon, and we can't activate Izzy, which is sad. Izzy, I wish that card was an all turn, but either way, you're still being able to suspend an opponent's Digimon, potentially preventing them from having an extra swing. You could also be running Arbormon as well as Beetlemon as essentially your hybrid win condition if you wanted. If you don't have the ability to run the Mimis or you're out of Digi-Eggs, that is an option. As for Okuwas, the reason this Okuwa here is because I'm using this as a placeholder to talk about the promo Okuwa. So the promo Okuwamon, which is currently its cheapest, is $18 for near mint on TCG Player. It has the effect, your turn. When this Digimon would Digivolve into a card with Insectoid in its trait, all of your opponent's Digimon gain all turns. When this Digimon becomes suspended, lose 1 memory until the end of your opponent's turn. That essentially makes it Tropical Venom. Tropical Venom Light. Sounds like a soda brand. Besides the point, though. It's one of the reasons why it's very useful. It also has the Inherited. While this Digimon has Insectoid in its trait, it gains Piercing. So this makes it a lot easier to not have to rely on Kuwaga X. You can run more copies of Weedmon in order to get that memory boost, because you're still guaranteeing Piercing. This is why a lot of people are running this new Okuwa at 4, but again, if you don't have the money for it, don't worry. This deck is a good deck for learning how to play. It's not going to guarantee you wins. I will say that now. But it is a good deck for people who want to learn how to play the game and who want to learn how X Antibody works. As for our option cards, Dimension Scissor, which will essentially let your Grandis have a third swing, essentially, because it has one of your Digimon gains the following effect. When this Digimon deletes an opponent's Digimon in battle and survives, unsuspend it. Your Grandis is essentially going to get a third swing off of this, more reliably guaranteeing a OTK. Grandis Scissor is another good card. It kind of does a similar thing where Grandis is going to be able to unsuspend. So if you guarantee that you have enough memory to do this, you can basically, or even if it passes turn, because of it may attack your opponent's Digimon, you'd be able to swing and potentially take out your opponent. It's not guaranteeing that you're going to be able to swing for game, but it is guaranteeing at least an extra swing. Personally, I prefer Dimension Scissor. It's a cheaper cost, and it's guaranteeing an unsuspend where I can unsuspend and I have the choice to swing for game, and I'm not forced into swinging into an opponent's Digimon. But I cannot deny that Grandis Scissor can suspend an opponent's Digimon, so it is a useful card. Ground Fang is another card that can be useful. Problem is, it is an Ace 8 cost. I would say this is a card that's only a last resort, and if you're running this in your deck, pray to God it's Insecurity. Just pray to God it's Insecurity, and you're not going against a Greymon deck, because they would be able to they essentially would be able to trash 2 of the same level Digimon cards from their stack to prevent deletion or bouncing effects. And while you wouldn't be able to return one of your opponent's suspended Digimon, you can return one of their Tamers. So it is a good card if your opponent has suspended Cool Boys or Yugis, or any other card that could work like that. For Tamers, we have Cool Boy. I've mentioned Cool Boy. Cool Boy is getting cheaper, thankfully, but it's still, if you're wanting a full play set, you're running about $12, $13, maybe $15, depending on if you're getting shipping. If you're able to get them, you're able to get them. If you're not able to get them, don't sweat it. But also, I want to point out Izzy and Mimi. Izzy and Mimi can actually make a warping from your level 5 Okuwa into Grand and then go into Grandis. How that chain could play out is you have Izzy and Mimi out. You then have a Okuwamon X Antibody out, potentially. You go into Grand from Izzy and Mimi because of their effect. And then you go through your X Antibody option card to Digivolve into Grandis. Problem with this is you're not going to be able to guarantee the Digibursting. But if you're in a pinch and you need to swing into your opponent's Digimon, this is a viable option to do that. If you have ways of unsuspending your Digimon, that can work. But that is an option you have available to you, is what I'm saying. But that is it for this. Again, I want to preface, this deck is a budget deck. I don't have the promo Okuas. I don't have enough cool boys to run in this. I wanted to find a way to make this deck as beginner friendly as I could. And this is what I came up with. I want more people to get into this game. I really do. I love this game. This game is really fun for me. It has that competitive edge I like, but it doesn't have the toxicity I've seen in other card games. And I've seen some toxicity before. So I try to come up with ideas for decks that are like this, that can be unconventional, that can be budget, that can be rogue. This isn't rogue, but this is a budget. And honestly, I am happy. I want to again say this deck is not going to guarantee you a first place. It's not going to guarantee you the OTK. What I can tell you is that this deck can help you learn how X Antibody works and how some of the old effects from the past have influenced green today. When we were in BT-5 and we didn't know what BT-09 was except for X Antibody is a thing, by the time we kind of figured X Antibody out, we were already in BT-6. We didn't really see digibursting being a thing until we get the promo Okuwamon and we see how Grandis can OTK. So honestly, I'm happy that digibursting has come back through Grandis. But again, I hope you enjoyed this video. Leave a like, comment, tell me what you think about this. What would you change in here? What kind of budget ideas do you have? You know, I'm interested in hearing all this. I traveled from store to store. You know, I travel over to LA, to Riverside. I like to see what people come up with. You know, whether it's a rogue deck, it's a budget deck, you know, you're trying to learn. I get it. I want to see what people come up with. But again, I hope you enjoyed this. I will see you in the next video. Again, an update. My little Digimon Survive project is still going to happen. It's just tournaments and the final stretch of store championships are coming in. And I do actually have jury duty coming up soon. So hopefully the next week I'll be able to take that time to really hash out this script I'm writing for this video. But I will be trying to keep more deck analysis videos coming throughout this time. Next deck that I'm going to be doing is another one of it's another deck that I kind of just wanted to see if I could build. And that's going to be Tribal Gatomon X Antibody. I'll see you in the next video. Peace.